A new peer-reviewed study published in one of America's oldest education journals looked at over 1,000 home-educated children across the United States of America, and the results are pretty interesting. Even after controlling for income and ethnicity, home-educated children were scoring in the top quarter of the country in standardised tests. So what does that mean for home education more broadly? Is it a better choice? Well, it is more complicated than that, as you may well expect, and the research here does have some limitations, so we are going to talk about it today. What did it find? What can we take away from it? Welcome back, my name is Joanna. I'm a mum to two, a 3-year-old almost, and an almost 1-year-old, oh my gosh. And I am making loads of short videos on research-based, evidence-based, data, academic papers, the lot, on various topics like pregnancy, breastfeeding, education. I used to be a teacher and I might homeschool, I'm not quite sure yet. So I basically just want to make informed, evidence-based decisions to try and be a better parent. So if you like the idea of that, please do hit subscribe and like. I'd love to have you join me. So what is the study that we're talking about today? It's by Dr. Brian Ray and Dr. Ray Hoelzle. This study was published in 2026 in the Peabody Journal of Education, and it's a peer-reviewed academic journal. It's described as the first nationwide academic achievement data on home education children collected in over 15 years, so it is filling a really needed gap in research. The researchers recruited 1,149 home-educated students aged from 5 to 18 years old across the United States, and they collected standardised test results across reading, language, maths, science, social studies, and then they asked their parents why they decided to home educate in the first place. In terms of reason for home educating, the top reasons were wanting to emphasise family life together, wanting to provide moral instruction and moral values, wanting to customise educational experiences, dissatisfaction with academic quality at schools, concerns around school achievement, things like safety, drugs, negative peer pressure. Religion was also a factor, but it wasn't the dominant one. And on achievement, the numbers are pretty interesting. Let's talk about the findings. So in raw, unweighted terms, home-educated children in this study scored at mean percentiles of 75 to 79 across all 5 subjects. To put that in context, the average for all of the children nationally is the 50th percentile. So those children are scoring well above into the top quarter. So from the 50th percentile, they're scoring either 75 to 79. But the researchers went a step further, and this is what makes this study quite interesting and more rigorous according to what came before it. They took a subset of children who did the same test, the Iowa Achievement Test, and they weighted that sample to match the national norm group on 2 key variables, income and ethnicity. Both of those strongly linked to academic outcomes in conventional schools, but applying for those controls, the weighted mean percentiles ranged from 74.6 in maths to 81 in reading, and still statistically significant with large effect across every single subject. And 2 findings stand out as particularly interesting. First, that parental education level was not associated with the children's test scores, and in conventional schooling, parental education is one of the strongest predictors in terms of how a child's going to perform. That relationship just didn't show up in home educated kids, so that I'm a teacher doesn't mean that my kids, if I'm going to home educate, are necessarily going to achieve any better than another home ed child whose parents aren't a teacher. Let's talk about some methodological concerns. This is where I need to slow down. The authors do themselves flag some important limitations of this paper that need to be highlighted. It's not a random study, and it can't be. Families in this study were recruited through homeschool education, social media, and a homeschool influencer. The authors are transparent about this, that there is no reasonable way to get a truly randomised national sample of homeschool education. It's a problem for the field, not just this study. Then this does mean that the sample skewed towards more engaged, connected family, which may not be representative of all children. I do need to just go and have a little baby break, so I will return. Right, we're back. If the lighting's different, it's because I've got a breastfed baby. If you know, you know. My attention is sort of split everywhere. Anyway, back to it. The problem number 2 is that the sample is 83% white, so this sample does underrepresent Hispanic, Black, Asian children. So therefore, this limits how widely you can actually generalise findings. Problem 3, causation cannot be established. This is kind of an issue with most studies, I find. The data is concurrent rather than longitudinal, and they are generally unable to make causal claims. We can't say that home education causes better outcomes. It's possible that the families who choose to home educate are simply more engaged, more aware to their children's education, and those children would have performed well in any setting. Problem 4, a conflict of interest question. Dr. Brian Way is a founder and president of the National Home Education Research Institute, an organisation that advocates for home education. So this paper does declare that there are no potential conflicts of interest, but independent critics do describe that this body of research is advocacy oriented. So that is the context. It is pretty well worth knowing. What does other research show? So, more independent researchers. We've got 2020 review by Hamlin, published in the same journal as this study. And this is notable. It's called for a new generation of research on homeschooling, pointing out that most existing studies are descriptive rather than explanatory, and that we still can't isolate the effect of home education itself from all of the other factors that are at play. The Cardus Educational Survey, which is one of the only studies to use truly randomised sample of home educated families and graduates, found much more mixed results than Dr. Ray's work, with some outcomes that are definitely positive for home educated children, but the likelihood of home educated children going into higher education is less. My personal take on that is that home educated children are probably more likely to follow their interests, passion and skills, and probably more likely to specialise in something that they're interested in, which, I mean, that's probably what I'm going to say to my children, because trust me, everyone's got a degree and I do really see the value in having skills. No, but that's my personal opinion. There's also Kunzman and Gaither, which is a comprehensive 2020 review in the whole field, and they concluded that the research base remains largely insufficient to make confident claims about whether home education is consistently outperforming conventional schooling, particularly on social development, civic engagement and adult well-being. So they are arguing that we can't make big generalised claims. But where the evidence is most consistent and most compelling is for children with SEND, or also children where the conventional schooling environment has just broken down for them, like people who are being bullied, for instance. The flexibility of home education does appear to offer real benefits for those children, and that's probably the strongest claim that research can tell us at the moment. So what can we take away from this? Well, this study is much more rigorous than the other studies that came before, so that is really, really strong. It's peer reviewed now as well. It was conducted last year, it was when I read the conference paper, but this is the 2026 peer reviewed study, which I'll link below. It uses multiple validated tests. It attempts for demographic controls, not the best, but it attempts. The authors are also honest and self-reflective of what it can and what it can't show. And the finding that home educated children score in the top quarter nationally, even adjusting for income, ethnicity, that was also genuinely significant and should not be dismissed. But what we don't know is if home education causes those results. As I said, we have a self-selected sample. We have a research field where the most prolific researcher is also an institutional advocate for home educating. So the honest answer is home education can work very well, especially for motivated families, engaged families, children with specific needs, maybe SEND, children who maybe have been bullied, but it's not a guaranteed upgrade and the research does not prove that, support it. What it does prove is that it's worth taking seriously, and we shouldn't just disregard it as, you know, they're going to be socially isolated or they're not going to do very well. For instance, parents who are thinking about it, that is really, really reassuring. For me personally, that's quite reassuring, because if I ever mention it to people, most people turn their nose up and ask all these questions, which research to me has shown that actually all these things about social isolation, all these things often actually are red herrings. So the study is linked in the description. It's open access, you can read it yourself. Everything else that I have discussed is also linked in my description. If you liked the video, please do hit like and subscribe. I'll see you for another one, and I hope you stick around. I'll be making more videos just like this. So I'll see you for the next one. And hopefully that's me for the night, although probably not.